Chapter 12, Lift, Harness the Strength of 10. When the COVID-19 pandemic was in its early stages in the United States, there was a shortage of clinical face masks for healthcare workers. As the supply of commercially produced masks continued to dwindle, it became clear that a more DIY type of solution was urgently needed. If you needed to make one face mask for yourself or for a loved one, the easiest route would probably be to look up instructions and make it yourself. But what if the demand for millions of masks within a few weeks? Enter Project Protect, a collaboration among various community groups in Utah. Their goal was to create 5 million masks in 5 weeks. Their method was to teach other people how to create the masks and to make it easy for them to teach each others. The first people were taught directly. Then the method was recorded and a 5-minute video was put up on their website teaching exactly how to do it and calling for volunteers. Project Protect would provide the materials and the volunteers would pick up as many packs as they could sew or teach other people to sew and return the finished masks. Within the first week, 10,000 volunteers had delivered the first million masks. Within 5 weeks, 50,000 volunteers reached their seemingly impossible goal of 5 million masks. Imagine how much time and effort it would have taken one person or 10 people or even 100 people to do that. It was an astonishing achievement, especially when you consider that almost none of the volunteers knew how to make these masks at the beginning of the 5 weeks. Whenever we want a far-reaching impact, teaching others to teach can be a high-leverage strategy. Use stories to turn your audience into teachers. A few years ago, my grandfather died in New York City. Since I was the only other family member living in the United States, it fell to me to go through his apartment and sift through all his belongings. And when I did, here's what I found. Nothing. There were books and clothes. There were a few paintings and photos. There was an address book. But the narrative of the life that he had lived, about what really mattered to him, had gone with him. I remember looking through the names in his address book and having no idea who was a lifelong friend and who was a one-time acquaintance. None of the names meant anything to me, but they had meant something to him. Suddenly I was aware, in a way that I had never had fully been before, of how much of ourselves we take with us in the end. Unintentionally, we often leave only pathetically small clues for those who come after us. It amazes me how easy it is to forget previous generations. Most people cannot tell you the first and last names of their 8 great-grandparents. Ponder that for a moment. The language we speak, the place we live, and the history we inherit are shaped by ancestors we don't even know the names of. A lot is lost in those decayed memories. So much that many of us, once we reach a certain age, find ourselves struck by a curiosity so powerful that we are compelled to track down any available clues about our ancestry. It turns out that there is a far simpler way to pass our history on to future generations through the sharing of family stories. Stories are bridges from past to present. They make history come alive. They expand our sense of self. I know of one family who got together once a year for the sole purpose of keeping previous generations alive. They bring photo albums. They create slide decks filled with memories. They share their favorite stories of specific ancestors. They have been doing this now for 50 years. There is no better way to teach than through the power of stories. Indeed, the right story can live on for millennia. Just think of Aesop's fables. Aesop was a storyteller and a slave. He lived more than 2,500 years ago in ancient Greece. He had lessons he wanted to impart, and he did so through memorable stories. His stories were so easy to remember and share, they were passed down by word of mouth. We love stories, we understand stories, we remember stories, and that means it's easier to share or to teach stories. Stories have the power to turn any audience into a room full of teachers. When you learn to teach, you teach yourself to learn. Teaching others is also an accelerated way to learn. Even thinking we might be called upon to teach can increase our engagement. We focus more intently. We listen to understand. We think about the underlying logic so that we could put ideas into our own words. Since writing Essentialism, I have been blessed with many opportunities to teach its principles and practices, and in teaching the ideas I continue to learn. Indeed, every time I teach an audience about how to be an essentialist, I learn something new about how to be a better essentialist in my own life. For example, in learning how one essentialist applied the ideas, I was inspired to start a new practice. Every day I leave my home office, I call out the time I leave. I am like a town crier. It's 5:01 p.m. I do it loud. I do it for fun, but I also do it for my own accountability to live what I'm teaching. Think about how hard it is to recall a route we've taken dozens of times until we have to give someone else directions, or how hard it is to fully absorb the plot of a novel you read until you've described it to someone. Follow the Sesame Street rule. The head of marketing at a major international software business I worked at was frustrated. He had expended a lot of personal effort to get the whole company on the same page. He had paid internal and external management consultants to craft a strategy. He had given presentations on the strategy to people within the company. He was consistent in the way he shared the strategy with customers, and yet it was a mess. Some salespeople explained it one way, others explained it in a different way. Employees all had their own varying interpretations. It was like they were speaking a different language. For a company of 100,000 employees in 130 countries, getting people to simply understand the strategy, never mind implement it, was proving a heroic challenge. Then a different idea was floated, to simplify the message to a short whiteboard sketch that could be explained in under 10 minutes. The head of marketing taught it to a pilot group first. Then he had them practice coming to the front of the room and teaching it to one another. Then he sent them off to go teach it to their teams. Everyone was expected not only to learn it, but also to learn how to teach it. Anyone could be asked to stand up in front of a group and teach it at any time. Within just a few weeks, the inconsistencies disappeared. An HR rep in Germany could explain it. A finance manager in California could explain it in the exact same way. This meant that the customers were getting the same message as well. Pretty soon the impact began to multiply. What had once involved months of frustrating effort became a virtually effortless path to success. If you try to teach people everything about everything, you run the risk of teaching them nothing. You will achieve residual results faster if you clearly identify, then simplify the most important messages you want to teach others to teach. These messages should be not just easy to understand, but also hard to misunderstand. A.G. Lafley, the CEO of Procter & Gamble, called this the Sesame Street simple rule. Don't go for overly sophisticated message. Don't go for the one that makes you sound smart. Go for the straightforward message that can be easily understood and repeated. Make the most essential things the easiest ones to teach and easiest ones to learn.